Today's program is part of the award-winning series Profiles in Literature, featuring interviews with persons prominent in American literature for children. The moderator of this series is Dr. Jaqueline Shachter Weiss.
Profiles in Literature is delighted to present the prolific author, Phyllis Reynolds Naylor. About how many of your books have been published to date?
I think about 85, with 5 more backed up at the publishers.
You've been writing full-time for 35 years. That means you've averaged more than 2 books a year. It's tremendous. With you is your editor, Karl. Jean, though you no longer live in New York, do you continue to release Karl books for Athenaeum and edit for Naylor?
Yes, I do. I work at home. Go into the office just occasionally.
Joining us is Carolyn Wicker-Field, Coordinator Emerita of Children's Work for the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Welcome to Philadelphia. Now, Jean, you and I have been friends for a long time.
Yes, a long time.
And Phyllis, as a cat lover, I feel like a friend of yours, especially since I saw the photo of Marco and Polo in what book?
The Grand Escape.
Yes, a wonderful book. Story of 2 cats, house cats, who escape into the real world. But I guess this is enough about cats. Tell us about your family. Introduce them to us in this picture.
In that picture, there's my husband, Rex, and his daughter, Nan Lee, and my 2 sons. I think the one sitting beside me on the couch is Michael, with his fiancée, Jeannie Menz. And then on the floor below is my older son, Jeff, and his wife, Julie, and their 2 little girls, Sophia and Tressa, who had the chicken pox when that was taken.
Very nice, thank you. Now, before publishing a book or sending it to the publisher, I understand that your husband criticizes them. Is that true? Does he read
Harshly,
them and criticize
yes.
them for you?
He's very good.
He's good. What is his profession?
He is a retired speech pathologist and keeps very busy with chess and social issues and critiquing
and reading
my
your books.
Yes.
I would judge that too.
Yes.
Now, in this photo, where is this wintry home of yours?
We live in Bethesda, Maryland. We have since 1967, and it's home to us. Both boys were raised in that house, so that's...
Now we have a picture of the inside of the house. What is this group that's sitting in there?
The critique group is actually not sitting in my house. We're sitting in someone else's house.
They are.
This is... My husband reads all of my books, and then I read each of my books a chapter at a time to a small group of authors. One is Peggy Thompson, one is Marguerite Murray, and the other is Joan Karas. And we meet in Marguerite's home.
Now, do they actually criticize your books for you,
Yes.
or they just sit and listen?
Oh, no.
Oh, they
no.
criticize. Oh,
To the
good.
point of tears sometimes.
And now we have a picture of your office. At what draft of your book do you use a computer?
I do 2 drafts in longhand on a clipboard, and sometimes 3 drafts, and then the 3rd or the 4th is on a word processor.
How many revisions do you generally do for a book?
Well, Jean can attest to the fact that my latest book, Ice, actually went through 17 drafts. I think Jean only saw 7 or 8 of them, but that's unusual, probably 6 or 7.
I salute your patience and perfectionism. Here is a photo of you doing an early draft. Where are you?
I'm on Amtrak.
And why do you use the train so often?
I like that buffer zone between leaving home and getting packed and all the things you have to do to go on a trip to speak, and getting there and being met by a committee and being taken out to dinner. I like to have that day or 2 or 3 sometimes of just writing, being in my own room on the train. No kitty litter to empty, no dishes to do. Just being served, really, and being able to write all night if I like. I love it.
Oh, are you motivated? Your book, Night Cry, won the Edgar Allan Poe Award from the Mystery Writers of America. I like the way you developed self-reliance in 13-year-old Ellen, who baked a turkey, darned socks, and painted cupboards when all alone. Self-reliance contributed to her heroism later. To whom did you dedicate Night Cry?
To Jean Karl. And it was the only thing I was able to say when I got the award, that it was dedicated to her, and indeed she deserved it.
And Jean seems to have a knowing look on her face when mentioning that book. Jean, you started the children's book department for Athenaeum, and
Yes.
you've written books for middle graders.
That's right.
I'd like to discuss one of your newer works. It's published by Reader's Digest Books and contains valuable tips. Please tell us why you did, how to write and sell children's picture books.
I did it because I was asked to do it. Many years ago, I did another book about children's literature, and an agent was trying to convince Writer's Digest Press that they should reissue that book, but instead, this is what they wanted, a book on how to write and sell picture books. So I thought, well, that might be kind of interesting to do, and it might be, I might be able to give people the kind of really helpful advice that they need. So many books I'd seen on this subject made it seem easy, and I thought it isn't easy.
No,
it isn't
no.
easy to write anything, and picture books may be harder to write than anything else, and I thought if I can do a book that would make people realize how difficult it is but help them achieve success in that area, I would really be doing something. So I undertook to do it and did it.
And you have accomplished your end.
And Jane, you've also another new book this year. Tell us about that. America Alive, A History by Philomel.
Yes, that also I was asked to do. Evidently, from bookstores, we're getting a lot of requests for American history books at about the 5th grade level. And for various reasons, there were people who thought that I would be able to do this. And again, I thought it would be an interesting challenge. And to do a short one, I mean, to do a history of the United States from the beginning to the present in 100 manuscript pages. So I set out to do it and found that I learned a great deal, and I really enjoy doing it.
And Phyllis says that you were a great help to her in her book, How I Became a Writer. Phyllis, how does an editor assist you in writing your books?
Oh, all the way from holding your hand to that final polishing. I think Jean has a knack of seeing the overall, as well as the tiny little details that are wrong, making all the separate parts come together to make the whole. And she's wonderful. That's why she's sitting here beside me.
All right, now let's discuss your 1992 Newbery Award winner, Shiloh. What was it that you said to your husband when you heard that you were getting it?
Everyone remembers that one sentence.
Yeah, I know.
They remember nothing
everybody
else.
would love to hear it.
Insulted. But he was out jogging, and when he came home, he said, I was standing on the porch, and the first words out of my mouth were, I have to tell you that when you win the Newbery, you have to go to New York the following day to appear on the Today Show. That's the second call you get after the Newbery. And so he said the first words out of my mouth were, I have 24 hours to lose 30 pounds.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Did you? I'm not going to ask you. I won't ask you. I won't ask you.
No, forget.
Now, did you have any censorship problems with Shiloh?
Yes. various kinds of censorship problems. The very strange thing to me is that Judd Travers, the villain in this book, lies, cheats, steals, kills deer out of season, abuses his dogs, and yet the only criticism I get is that he cusses, that he says 2 cuss words. Oh. And it's very strange. It's, I think that parents are afraid that what they tell me is that the children will do anything they read in a book, which would mean then that they would go home and kick the dog because Judd Travers kicks his dog, which of course is underestimating the intelligence of our children.
It's so superficial.
We have another picture, and this is a picture of your office with the painting of Wyoming Paintbrush Award, which you won for Shiloh. Did you ever know a dog, a stray, like Shiloh?
Oh yes,
the book did.
The book was based on it, and I have a picture. Actually,
fascinating.
This is the real dog. Its name is Clover. This was about 4 months after it was found, and it's now found a happy home in West Virginia with our friends, the Maddens, who took it in after I found it. It's really a female, so I keep referring to it because it's a male in the dog, but in the book. But they tell me she's the happiest dog in West Virginia now, and I
think that's
she
wonderful, wonderful.
And tell us about that magnificent
quilt.
The quilt is one of several that I've received. I think this was done by the Alden Elementary School children in New York. And it looks as though each child made a picture, and they put it together in chronological order, and then the teacher and parents sewed it together. And I use that as a very special quilt when grandchildren come to visit. They get to sleep under the Shiloh quilt.
It's from a reading class. I'm a former reading teacher. I love Shiloh. Very different is your gripping story, The Keeper, which won an American Library Association Best Book for Young Adults. Tell me, why did you write it?
I wrote it because it's really based on a very tragic episode in my own life. I was married very young, at 18, to a brilliant man at the University of Chicago who 5 years later, just seemingly overnight, became paranoid schizophrenic. And it was a very terrifying experience for me. And we eventually divorced. He was committed to a state institution. And 15 years later, I wrote an autobiography for adults called Crazy Love, in which I detailed these years with my husband and how terrifying it is to see someone you love become mentally ill. And I had so many letters about that book, some of them saying, "Be glad you had no children." And I was thinking how much worse it would have been had I had children. And then, of course, a writer takes it one step further. What if, not only what if I'd had children, but what if I was a child? What if I were a 13-year-old boy, for example, and my father began doing the strange things that my husband began doing? And so all of the things that take place in that book, all of the things that Nick's father did, were things that my husband did when he was mentally ill. And I think it gives children a better idea of what their classmates might be going through that they might not know about. I think it reaches young people who are in situations in which there is a family secret of any kind, drug abuse, sexual abuse, alcoholism, any secret that they must keep from their friends, where they feel that they can invite young people to their homes. And that's what the book was getting at.
Oh, you accomplished your goal.
Thank you.
How do you write differently for adults than for children? Because those two books were on the same theme.
Of writing differently. You're thinking of your main character. You're seeing the world through your main character's eyes. And if this person is 13, you're remembering when you were 13, how you spoke, how you felt. When I do picture books, I'm a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. I'm now working on an adult novel of a man who is 56 and who is grieving for his wife, and again I must go in the persona of that person.
What will that one be called? You might as well give it a little publicity.
Well, let's not, because
You
it's not
don't?
even finished yet.
All right.
So
Okay. Then let me mention that your book, A String of Chances, won the South Carolina Young Adult Book Award and was considered a notable children's book in the field of social studies. Evie's parents are reminiscent of your paternal grandparents. What kind of flack might you have had from religious fundamentalists concerning that
I
book?
didn't get a lot from them. I got a little bit. I think that was, oh yes, that was the book that one father wanted the school to ban because he
Can't
didn't like
believe that.
didn't like the burial in the book of the little baby. He said it wasn't a Christian burial. And in this book,
It was a very tender burial scene.
yes, the parents dig the grave themselves, and they get down in the grave and they spread it with grass because they want to go as far as they can with their baby. And that was based on a real incident that happened in the
was?
community out west. And this parent's objection was that it was all right for Evie to disagree with her fundamentalist father as long as at the end of the book she came back and believed everything that he did.
Oh, I see.
But none of this believing differently
see.
or finding your own truth.
I see.
And I'm sorry that he felt that way.
Yes, but it was one of your finest books. I enjoyed.
I love
A
that
String
book.
of Chances. Another book that I liked very much was Send No Blessings, which won the 1990 American Library Association Notable Book for Young Adults. I'd like to know on what basis you were able to get the National Endowment for the Arts funding to do the book.
You get the grant not based on really what you're going to do, but on work that you have already done, and it's given on the basis of
your past record?
your past record.
I see.
But when I got the grant, I decided that I really wanted to use it traveling in West Virginia, getting back issues of a wonderful folklore magazine in West Virginia called Golden Seal. And I did. I bought every issue that I could find. And during this travel, we went through the little town of, I believe it was Hinton, West Virginia, and I saw the trailer home that became the home of Beth, was it, in this book, and was so taken with this little trailer sitting askew off the main highway and thinking, who lives there?
Yes.
And what if a teenage girl lives there? And how does she feel when the school bus lets her off at night?
Oh,
And she has to go in this little trailer
sad.
rather than those better homes down the road. And that's how all books begin, what if?
Yes. What is the importance? I already begin to see an answer of place or setting in your books. You see, you mentioned West Virginia.
It's so important. Sometimes it even gives you the plot idea. It gives you a feel for the characters, for what they value, for the kinds of lives that they lead, for their names. Names are very important in various places. And I try never to write about a place that I don't know well or that I haven't visited. And if it's something like the York Trilogy that I wrote with Karl as my editor, taking place, part of it in England, I wrote from the viewpoint of someone just visiting England because I have only visited England, so I would never attempt to write a book as though I lived there because I haven't.
I see. Is there a fan letter you would like to share? Something brief.
One very brief sentence from one. Dear Mrs. Naylor, I have 2 brothers, except one is a cat.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, Phyllis, you've written a number of series books, and the one that I'm very fond of is the one about Alice. And
Oh, yes.
I've read you've written 6 books of Alice as she's growing up, which I think is just marvelous. It's showing her at each period of, well, how old is she now? About 14, isn't she?
She's in 8th grade.
8th
now.
grade. Do you know someone like Alice?
Myself.
Yourself? Ah, that's wonderful.
Yes.
Oh, I think that's great. Well, what about Andy in Beatles Lightly Toasted? Who was the model for that?
Oh, probably just all of my Iowa relatives rolled up into one.
He was so funny. At what age did you sell your first story?
I was 16 and sold it to a former Sunday school teacher in a church magazine.
How much did you get for that then?
$4.67.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. I think that's wonderful. Somebody said something about that you had written a column.
Yes, I wrote a column called First Person Singular, which was published in teenage church magazines for 25 years under various titles. And I had a good time with that. It was a humor
wonderful.
column and a lot of fun.
Jean, I'd like to ask you, for how many authors do you serve as an editor now?
Oh, I suppose now about 15 or 20 probably.
Oh, really? Some retirement.
Yes, that's what my friends say when I'm never
joke.
available to do what they want me to do.
The joke. I would like to know why you earlier wrote science fiction for children and how you got your first editor for those books.
I wrote science fiction because at that time I was reading a lot of science fiction, and it was an area that appealed to me a great deal. And the first science fiction book I wrote was a book of 9 short stories. And I was writing a lot of speeches. I hadn't thought about writing fiction, but I found myself writing stories as part of speeches. And the last story in that first book was a story that was in a speech. And when I finished reading the speech, somebody said, where did that story come from? And I said, I wrote it for this speech. And they said, why are you wasting your time as an editor? And then somebody else said, well, we need editors too. And so then I thought, well, maybe I could write some other stories to go with it. And I did. And so it became the turning place.
And how did you get your first editor for those books?
Oh, well, when I finished that book, I didn't know what to do with it because I knew all the other children's editors, and it's very hard to evaluate what you do yourself.
You couldn't publish it yourself either.
No,
That
I would never
She's
do.
too ethical.
And so I got an agent who submitted it to an editor under a pseudonym. And then the editor called the agent and said she would like to talk to this author. And the agent called and said, what do I do now? And I said, I've got this terrible cold, I'll just call her. And so we had this long conversation about what I was going to do, because editors need editors too, you see. And so then I was going to do this revision and send it back. And she got off the phone and she went to somebody else in the office and said, I just talked to this new author and it sounds just like Jean Karl's with a cold.
Oh, no.
Some disguise. Some disguise.
I think that's marvelous.
But it worked out.
Oh, yes, it worked out very well.
Phyllis, do you write best in the morning or at night or in the afternoon? When do you do your
I'm
writing?
a morning person.
You're a morning. You get
Yes.
up early in the morning?
I get up about 6 and go for a swim. And
well, that's good.
then I come home and write until I go flat. And sometimes that's the middle of the afternoon. Sometimes I get my second wind after supper and write some more.
at
It's
night.
just, I don't have to do this. I just
It's the
love
way
to do it.
Well, that's right. Do it the way
Inner
it's
driven.
easiest for you. Jean, are you, as an editor, are you allowed to help select your illustrator for your books, when any books that have illustration? You're not?
No.
You don't have any say about
I
it?
have never seen. For this
Or
book,
the
I did not
book
see.
jackets or something?
I did not see any of the artwork until it was printed.
That's for Shiloh?
kidding.
No,
No,
for
that's
America Alive?
Alive.
Oh, now for the books that I edit,
Yeah,
yes, I
what do you
I
do?
see the artwork. I know.
Now, do you
you
have
do.
something to say about that?
Oh yes, I certainly do have something to say about that, but not on the books I write.
But
For
you-
Shiloh, you picked?
No, I did not edit Shiloh. John
Okay.
in the office edited Shiloh.
Okay.
John Landon
But,
was the editor
oh,
of
okay.
Shiloh.
John Landon?
Landman.
L-A-M.
N-M-A-N.
Thank you.
But yes, I do. I work.
You work with the art director,
right.
and if you didn't like it, why?
And
Sometimes she'd say okay, and other times.
well, we try to
forget it.
pick out somebody that we think is right, and
I think that's interesting. Well, tell us a little bit about this procedure of editing a book. I don't think we've ever discussed this before. You're an editor, and she's an author. How do you go about editing a book?
the author sends me the book, and I read it through and make notes to myself. And then I'll put it aside and go back and read it again, generally.
I love that. I think
And,
that's so important.
and make more notes to myself. And sometimes at that point, lately, I've been appending little notes to the manuscript itself. And then from the notes that I've made to myself, I write to the author and tell them, as far as I can determine, what I think they're trying to do in this book and where I think they have succeeded and where I think it hasn't quite come through and where things don't really work for me. And, you know, I think it's oftentimes the reason it is this way is that the author knows everything about this book.
That's right.
And they
yeah.
think it's all there, but it isn't. And so it takes a totally outside person who hasn't come to this before to see where the holes are. And so that's my job, is to point out the holes that the author can't really realize are there until somebody
close,
has
they're too
pointed
close.
out. Yes, and sometimes even husbands and
Critic groups.
boutique groups are too close in a way. It takes somebody a little farther away.
You've been a wonderful team. Thank you very much. Author-editor Jean Karl is proud of Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, her diversified discovery. Naylor relaxes by writing children's humor after a grim adult or young adult book. The Newbery medalist chooses non-wealthy, most challenged characters and concludes, I'll go on writing because an idea in the head is like a rock in the shoe. I can't wait to get it out. Thank you both for being here with us.
Thank you.
La 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 la.